Thank you. Okay. So how many of you are doing startups in this today's audience? All right. How many of you are doing network infrastructure related startups? Okay, awesome. So how do you deliver the best if you're doing startups in wireless area? So how do you deliver the best possible wireless experience to the new mobile generation? Of course, it seems like they keep changing every day, right? So this is what Keerti and his team did by founding Aruba Networks in 2002 to liberate businesses from the last wired barriers. And not only that, they kept at it and took it public back in 2007. And as of today, like a few hours ago when the market closed, I looked at the market cap. It has 2.26 per Yahoo Finance. And I'm just quoting it from there, since they're a publicly held company, and the revenue of over $700 million. Keerti, before founding Aruba, had a lot of leadership roles in product management, technology, marketing, and engineering at Cisco, Intel, and a number of startups. And there was a very successful startup, Shasta Networks, which was purchased by, those of you remember, Norton Networks. And I'm sure still your voice calls go through their switches, even though Nortel name is not there. And he has been a pioneer in the networking and communications area and has been granted a number of patents, as well as he was honored by Purdue University, that's where he did his master's, as an outstanding electrical and computer engineer in 2009. He's also serves as an advisor as well as angel investor to a number of startups in various markets. So those of you looking for angel money, so make sure you grab hold of him before he leaves. Even though he also was kind enough that I put his email address also at the end of the slide, so you'll have that. So with that, what I would like to do is to invite Keerti to share his amazing, colorful, and exciting entrepreneurial journey with us this evening. So let's give him a big round of applause.
Well, thank you very much, Naveen. It's an honor and pleasure to be with all of you today. I just thought I'd share a little bit of my background and my story. I think this is more of a personal journey that I want to share with all of you. And I saw a lot of hands go up when Naveen asked how many of you are at startups. It's certainly a very, very important and interesting and probably going to be the journey of your lives as you go through it. So I'll describe mine and hopefully there's some lessons for you there. And I think we're opening up for Q&A afterwards. So I'll try to keep it brief and then have a lot of questions after that. So a little bit about myself. I am from Hyderabad, India, born and brought up there. And I was born in a middle-class family, like probably a lot of us here. My parents were, they were service-minded individuals, so they actually ran a school for the mentally handicapped children. And my mom was a clinical psychologist, and based on her background, they created a little school. And, they were entrepreneurs, I would say, in their own right, although it was a non-profit organization. So very, very standard, I would say, middle-class upbringing in Hyderabad. And one thing that I think a lot of us realized, and my dad told me this when I was entering 10th grade, is it was clear that I needed to graduate and get a job very quick because money was not bequeathed to me. And so as a result, studies was an important thing. And one of the things that he told me was, look, if you want to go study and do something, I won't be able to help you from a financial perspective. So you're on your own. And he didn't have to tell me that. I knew that just knowing the state we were in. And so like most students, when you join this 11th grade or intermediate, as it's called in Hyderabad, you set your eyes at either becoming an engineer or a doctor. That was a pretty standard deal, I think, for for a lot of us. And for me, I just decided I wanted to get to the other side very quickly so I could get a job and sustain myself. And engineering was the shortest path to that. Medicine was going to take 10 years, so I said, that's not for me. 4 years is enough. And worked really, really hard. This was probably the hardest working years of my life in 11th and 12th. And fortunately for me, I got a rank good enough to get into a government engineering college. This was, again, because capitation was not an option for me. So I got into this university, JNTU, as it's called. It's one of the two esteemed universities in Hyderabad, Osmania University being the other one. And got into the electronics and communications program here. Got my bachelor's in technology out of JNTU. And along the way, of course, like most engineering graduates, engineering students, you want to think about what happens after engineering. And of course, the job option was an important one. So I interviewed, on-campus interviewing and so on. And I got a job right out of school. And it was, I still remember the letter for a grand sum of 2,800 rupees a month at, I think, I'm trying to remember the name of the company, TCS, Tata Consultancy Services. And the other option was to go to IIM, which again, I got into in IIM Lucknow. And the third option was to come to the US. And the first two options, I actually had the money to do. The third option, which is come to the US, I had no money for. And so again, I got into a school called Purdue University. And that was, it's a good school. I think for most of you that know, it's a good school, but it's in Indiana. And when you're in Indiana, California, everything is the same, right? It's all the US. So, and the reason I wanted to go there, how many of you recognize this? Have any of you been to Purdue? Who is that? No? Anybody else? Can anyone recognize that statue? No. It's Neil Armstrong. So he's a Purdue grad. And so we were like, obviously the man on the moon, right? And he was alive at the time, actually, and he lived pretty close to Purdue. So he would come and hang out in the coffee shops, and he was a good guy. So it was the best college I got into, and I decided it was time to take the flight. And because we didn't have any money, I'd applied for loans with the banks and put our little house that we had on collateral and said, hey, we'll take, I think, like 5 lakh rupees or something like that, which was a lot of money in those days, to buy the flight ticket and go there. I didn't get any assistantship, right, which was a way to pay for the tuition and so on. Because I didn't realize this at the time, but the US was in a recession in 91. And again, US is the promised land in India. Recessions and all, nobody recognizes that. And so my parents were brave enough and said, you'll figure it out. I'll fund you for 6 months, but after that, you're on your own. And and I felt like, okay, I've come this far, so I can probably go there and work for 6 months and get some assistantship. Only to find that there were roughly 700 people with me in the same state with no assistantship. And most of the assistantships were going to people that were citizens and green card holders, not the F1 visa holders that came from India. And so what do you do as a student, right? You go there and you decide it's time to make some money. And so my first job, real job actually, was basically flipping burgers at this Pappy sweet shop in Purdue. It's still there. If you guys go there, you should grab a burger. And for somebody from India, flipping burgers is a totally alien thing. And my first order was, somebody said, I want a burger well done. I'm like, how else do you do a burger? It has to be well done. But I had no idea what well done, medium rare was, right? So you learn that on the way. And the second order was, I want soft serve dipped in chocolate sauce. I look around, there's no training, right? You show up, and this was minimum wage, right? $4.25 an hour for working. And so anyway, you should, if you have not tried it, you should try making soft serve, dipping it in chocolate sauce, and taking it out without it collapsing. Okay, it's an art. So that's what I was learning. I was not learning linear equations, linear algebra, all these other things, right? That was what I was trying to do during the day. What this really taught me was really the formative education for starting a company, right? Because you're short-staffed, perennially short-staffed, you're overworked all the time. My working hours were after school ended, so it started at 5 o'clock and ended at 12 in the night. And multitasking was a deal, right? I would go there. You have to flip burgers, make soft serve, man the POS terminal, take the checks and the money. You have to clean, which nobody tells you you have to do. But that took us, we used to close the shop at 12, and the cleaning took us an hour to get the shop ready for the next day. And nobody wanted that shift, the 5 to 8 shift, but that's what I got. So anyway, it was a awesome experience, really good formative education to not complaining about work, right? I mean, when you do this kind of work, it's anything goes. That was what I would do from 5 to 8, or 5 to 10, 10, 12. My day job, on the other hand, outside of being in classes, was a very glamorous job in high energy physics, right? When I would tell people I was in high energy physics, everybody would go, man, you must be a smart guy. But the reality was I was not doing high energy physics. I was in EE. The job I got, this is the Purdue fountain. If you go to the Purdue campus, you should go check this out. 3 stories underneath the fountain, they have a accelerometer. There's an accelerator, right, and a collider for particle physics. And what the department needed to do was, the way they would move data from collecting from this collider back to these computers that were on the 4th floor of the building was to capture them on disks, take it out of the disk, and basically transport it using your feet and plug the disks into the computer for analysis. And so they decided they needed to network this thing. And they want to take the collider and connect it directly to the computer. And so my job was to figure out how to get a network going between these two. And there was, this is where I developed a hatred for cabling. There was no cabling infrastructure. So I had to dig trenches, go through the ceiling tiles. I know what's inside here because I have crawled through those ceiling tiles pulling cable. And eventually to get the network connected. And the network consisted at that time, this was again 92, 93, of a little box called a Cisco router. And it's an IGS router, one of the first few routers that Cisco built. And I was connecting them to these huge DEC machines, UltraVax clusters and so on. I think some of you in the audience might actually know about them. And silicon graphics machines for visualization and so on. So it was definitely cool stuff. I didn't do the research part. I was doing the IT part of it, of getting the data connected and so on. So that was basically, so the classes and education was in between these 2 jobs basically. And so, you try to get by, you work, and the goal is still, as I was doing all this really didn't pay for tuition, right? This only paid for my apartment, my utilities, basically subsistence. So by the end of 3 semesters or 4 semesters, I had loans of $16,000 or $20,000 because I had to pay the tuition. And $20,000, I remember this calculation still, right? I said, hey, this is, if I take $20,000 and multiply that by the conversion rate of the rupee in those days, it came to some enormous amount of money. well above what I'd taken the loan from the bank. And because we were still in a recession, there were no jobs for anyone. Forget F1 visa holders, right? And so the worst case scenario for me was that, I was going to go back to India and go join TCS for 3,000 rupees a month. And I remember still doing a spreadsheet calculation saying, if I saved 1,000 rupees a month, how long it will take me to finish that, clear that loan? And it was like 20 years or something like that. It was a very long time. So I said, okay, I really need to try getting a job in the US to be able to clear this loan out. And fortunately for me, in those days, there was no internet, right? There was no monster boards to search and stuff like that. So I would troll all the Usenet groups. I think you guys, if you remember, sock.culture.in, sock.jobs, all kinds of Usenet groups that were there. And Intel was the only company that was really doing well. They had just released the 486 and the 386, and they were building the Pentium. And they were advertising for jobs in the IT department, in the networking group, and they were looking for somebody with some networking experience to come and help them. And luckily for me, it was not any of the classes that I took. It was really the experience in the high energy physics department that helped me differentiate myself versus all these other candidates that were applying for this small set of jobs. And the other fortunate thing that happened for me was after they interviewed and I got an offer, they said, where do you want to go? We have offices in Albuquerque, we have offices in Folsom, we have Santa Clara, Arizona, Oregon, all these sites. And I was going there, wow, I have a job and they're asking me where I want to work. And it's like a dream. And so I, without any hesitation, said I want to be in Santa Clara because I really wanted to be in Silicon Valley. Outside, I mean, the lore was kind of spread. Andy Grove was on the cover of the Time magazine a year before. So Intel was like a dream job, getting a job at Intel and working there. And so I came here in '93. And basically my first job was that wiring closet. And what they said was, we are trying to build this next processor called the Pentium. And to build the processor, we need a very high-speed network. And what we have right now doesn't work. So we need something much faster. And we're going to spend a ton of money on IT to upgrade the infrastructure. And so we, my co-founder later, and I'll talk about him in a second, started our first jobs trying to basically create this very high-speed infrastructure for building the Pentium processor. And Vinod Dham, I think a lot of you probably know him, was the GM for this processor division at the time. And Andy Grove was the CEO. It was really a good time to be at Intel and really learn the culture. I think that was probably the most important thing at Intel to learn, was how they dealt with one particular topic, which I found extremely valuable throughout my career, which is, they call it constructive confrontation. Okay, if you worked at Intel, you know what that is. In meetings and so on, basically you don't hold back. If you have an opinion, you state it, no matter how good or bad the opinion is. And that is very good formative education. When you go in there from the university, learning to question things is actually extremely very important skill. And amongst your superiors when they're sitting around in the same table, right? And so I think the most memorable time for me out of this whole project, and I was at Intel for 2.5 years or so, this was my first job, as I said, was when we were asked to cut over the network, which was the old network, to this new network. And we were asked to do it basically with no downtime, which means the engineers that go home, next day morning they're going to come in, they should be able to continue to work. So we had a cutover window of basically 12 hours, right? 8 o'clock is when the premises is empty. 8 o'clock the next day, everybody comes in. You basically have to cut over. So which means you build the network in advance and you cut over live. And we started to do this at 8 o'clock, started flipping all the workstations. We had written a bunch of scripts and everything to do it. And it all looked good at midnight. We're like, man, we're ahead of schedule. We're going to go home and get some rest. And then 2 o'clock, nothing works, right? If all the computers are turned on, nothing works. And my boss looks at me and said, "We are going to be fired tomorrow. Do you know that?" And we were 4 or 5 of us sitting around looking at each other saying, what are we going to do? It was a stressful time because, Pentium, right? This is basically Intel's mothership platform. And at that time, you realize panicking is not a solution for anything. And we just had to keep your head cool, go back, look at what actually happened, and systematically bring it up again, right? So we had to, instead of bringing it all up with scripts, we said, okay, the script is not working, we have to do it manually. So we would manually bring up and figure out where the problems were. And the problem, as it turned out, was actually nothing to do with scripting or anything like that. It was faulty hardware, right? We bought a bunch of switches and stuff from different vendors, and the hardware was bad. Who would have imagined, right? You expect the hardware that you buy to work. This was, again, something that I apply in when I build products. Quality is going to be extremely important for everything that you do, right? It is probably the number one thing. Any product you buy, right? When it doesn't work, you feel disappointed, right? In your personal life. You never want your customer to experience that. And that, I think, was one of the key sort of, it was imprinted in my heart saying, whenever I do something, quality is going to be an extremely important thing. It's not just a buzzword, right? You really have to internalize that. So anyway, that particular day, we actually were successful. We brought up the network at 8 o'clock. We decided, we didn't sleep at all. And we decided to stay at work that entire day. We were stinking, but that's okay. We said until that day ended and there were no support calls, we would just make it work and then go home. And fortunately, it worked out that way. There was absolutely no support calls. We got a great award and all that for that kind of project. So anyway, that was a really fun time. A lot of stressful times, interesting times. But this to me, Intel was. I was not building products. I was building support infrastructure for folks that build products. And somehow that was inside me saying, I want to be able to be in the thick of the business. I don't want to be in a supporting role. I want to go actually build the business. And that kind of was in my heart. And so the next thing that we did, Pankaj Manglik, my co-founder who I worked with at Intel, we said, hey, it's time to let's see if we can start a company. This was 95. So 2.5 years out of college, we said we're going to go start a company. And we even had an idea. The idea was to deliver, this is literally out of the business plan, batched access to compute and storage over the network. Because that's what we did at Intel. That's the experience that we had developed. And we're like, hey, we built a really cool system here. Why don't we commercialize this and take it out to the market? And at that time, this is known as the cloud today, right? If you go to Amazon, this is what you get. We basically started to look around, and we had the idea, but we had absolutely no idea how to go approach customers and pitch to them. We were engineers. We had no infrastructure to support this idea because the first thing we looked at the internet, we're going to do this over the internet. How would people connect in 95 to the internet? Modems. Right? And to do this, you needed very high-speed broadband connections. So the infrastructure wasn't ready, and there was no business model. So we basically shelved it, saying the timing is not right. Plus, we have zero skills to actually execute on this idea. It's a good idea, but we can't do it. So the next thing I decided was it's time to go be part of a team that actually builds real products and takes it to market. And so to me, fortunately, I'd gotten to know the Cisco guys really well through this whole Intel experience. And they called me over and said, Jayshree Ullal, I don't know if many of you probably know her. She's the CEO of Arista. And it was at Cisco then, Mario Mazzola, the entire switching division at Cisco was built around these guys. And they called me and said, do you want to be a part of this team? And Cisco had just acquired their business called Crescendo. This was in 95. For the grand sum of $90 million or something like that. And so I joined that team. And I was, again, very, very lucky break. It was good to go work for people like Jayshree and Mario, who were pioneers, right, in terms of where to take the networking technology and the business. And the key things that I learned there, the reason I went there was to first learn how to build products, real products that people want to use. Learn how to pitch the products, the value proposition, meet the customers, make the contacts, what makes them tick. Understanding that was very important. And generally just get business experience, right, in quote. That basically means working with all the different groups in the company, working with the customer and delivering these products. So this was 2.5 years, 3 years almost that I was at Cisco building the switching products. And it was a fantastic time. At Cisco, we were what we called ourselves, we were plugging the world into the internet with these products that we built. And Dipinder, who's here, was with me at Aruba as well. We were all at Cisco trying to build these products. And to me, the Cisco stock was doing really well. Cisco would give some stock options to engineers at the time. And the stock was splitting, doubling and splitting. It was a fantastic time. And then I went and told Mario and Jayashree that, hey, I want to leave. Because I wanted to, Cisco, I felt at that time what happened, and this was actually a very crucial time for me, was, if I had stayed on, I could have definitely made money. But inside of me, I just felt a little hollow, to be honest with you. Because the work that I was doing, while fantastic, the translation of the work into success, which was basically it's a revenue measure, right? How much did you sell of the product that you built? I couldn't take any credit for that. I could take credit for the products that were built, but I could take zero credit for the business getting built. And that's because Cisco was already built as a business. And the channel was ready. I had to just put the product in the pipeline and it would just flow, right? So I was getting zero exposure. And you would make, you'd get recognition from all your superiors and your peers. You'd think you're doing a good job. You'd get the bonus check. You'd get the stock options. The stock was doing well. But inside I was like, I haven't done it with my hands, and I was not feeling good about that. So I wanted to push myself, and I said I want to leave and go start, go try my hand. This is why I came to Cisco. And at Cisco, at that time, I remember Luca Cafiero, who was with Mario, one of the VPs of engineering. He came by and said, "You are the most stupid guy I've ever seen." Literally, if you know Luca, right? He doesn't hold back, right? And he said, "You're insane. Why are you doing this? And we are going to double and split, and the stock will continue to keep going." First, I said, "I'm very fortunate that you feel taking the time to come and tell me that I'm insane is a big deal." Jayashree actually made me parade with all the GMs of the Cisco businesses saying, "I'll create a startup environment for you inside Cisco so that you can experiment." But it was not the same. I kind of knew, yes, I would build another product. The channel and the go-to-market and everything was kind of already set at Cisco. So I left to join a bunch of my friends at Shasta, which was a startup. We were I was not early here. I was about employee number 30 or something like that. The product was getting there. They needed product management, technical marketing type experience. And I was the first guy to join in that capacity. And basically, the goal here was to experience a startup, right? Before you go do your own thing, go experience it with a bunch of friends and see if you really like it. And if you do, then go try your hand at the next thing. And fortunately for me, 5 months into the company, I joined in January or something, and in June, we got acquired by Nortel. And now I'm here going from a company, Cisco was about 8,000 employees at the time I left, to a company that 100,000 employees. And so I was not going in the right direction. I wanted to go to companies with fewer employees. And here it was the 100,000 employees and a blank check, because Nortel had no IP expertise. So when they acquired Shasta, they basically said, "You guys have a blank check to go do whatever you want." So we had a fun time spending money and actually building a very, very large team and being successful too. Shasta, for those of you that don't know, was a product that took the world from the modem world to the broadband era. When DSL and all these lines started to make its way to the homes, they would all terminate on a box like Shasta before they get to the internet. So it was an important kind of capability in the network. And so we did that for a couple of years at Nortel, and the same team decided we're going to do this again. This time, instead of doing it for DSL lines, we're going to do this for 3G connections, because that's where the world was headed. And this company was called Tahoe Networks. And while Shasta was successful, Tahoe was already successful before it got started. In the eyes of the VCs, in the eyes of the founders, in the eyes of the employees, because we had done it before once. Okay, so people said this is a team that knows exactly what they're doing, and we raised $50 million. I was again not a founder; I was part of the founding team. From tier one VCs like Excel and Redpoint, and at those days, this was 2001. Money was easy to raise, kind of like today, actually, to be honest with you. But what happened was. I think and this was a very big lesson I learned through this process, was we wanted to, this time around, correct every mistake we made at Shasta, right? You take shortcuts when you're starting a company, you make little, you know what shortcuts you're taking, but you take the shortcuts anyway in building products. And when you do that, you're correcting, this is called System 2 effect, right? If those of you who have read these tech books, you should read about System 2, where you try to correct every mistake you made the first time around. And with Tahoe, that was the goal. And we tried to correct the system. And in the process, we were spending a ton of money, not talking to customers, because we thought we knew best. And the company didn't do well. It actually collapsed. And part of it was the dot-com bust. Part of it was, I think, our own execution, because there were other companies in the space that did well. So I left Tahoe at this time, basically saying I was not too happy with it, with how things were going. The founders were not seeing eye to eye. That was probably the number one reason why I wanted to leave. And for those of you who have co-founders, it happens, right? Sometimes things don't work out the way you want it to. And in this case, that was the case. And as an employee there, founding employee, I could see that very closely. And that was not a recipe for success. So I left that. And now this is the time when I decided, this was 2001, and I decided, hey, it was time to go, really, if I was ever going to start a company, this was it. Right? I was 10 years younger, 12 years younger, a lot more black hair. Because I talked to my wife through this process, and she knew I wanted to go start something. And every time I didn't start and joined another company, she'd go, what happened now? And so this time I said, I'm going to go do this. And you're ready when you start to not think about it and you start to really do something about it, which the first thing I did was to go look at my bank statements and go, how much money do I really have? Can I pay off my liabilities, which at that time were basically the mortgage on my home, which was in the Evergreen area in San Jose, and about $350K of home mortgage. And if I could pay that off and I had enough money left to live for 6 months to 9 months, that was enough, because I felt like if I can't do anything in 6 to 9 months, I'll go find another job. I knew quite a few people by the time in the Valley that I felt good about, my contacts enough to go, not feel like it was a huge risk. So that was very important, having that cushion. We also had our first baby in 2001. So, the responsibilities start to increase when you have a baby, right? You're caring for a little one. So anyway, we said this was the time to go try this. And I literally gave myself 6 months from start to finish to get this done. And what ended up happening at that time was, the first thing you do after you take the decision, quit the job, is to start really brainstorming different ideas, right? What are the different spaces, different markets that are going to evolve? And it was not like I had a brilliant idea before I left the job. I had absolutely no idea what company I was going to start. I just knew I was going to do something on my own that would leverage all my expertise. Clearly, domain expertise was important, because when you go try to raise money from venture capitalists, they're looking for your pedigree and knowing, do you know what you're doing? And so to us, it was still had to be in the networking space, and there were a couple of areas, Wi-Fi and security, that were becoming important, and they were still in the early days of innovation. And so we had viable ideas in both the Wi-Fi space and the security space. And we just said, for me particularly, if you were going to take on Cisco, which is the behemoth that it is, the gorilla in the space, you better have more than a technology differentiation. You need something more structural, something that is a business differentiation. And how many of you have read Innovator's Dilemma by Clayton Christensen? Some of you. If you have not read it, I highly recommend you should go read it, right? What he says there in that book is that true disruption comes when the incumbent is unable to embrace the disruption because their business model is going to be at risk. The money that they make is not going to be available to them as this disruption actually happens. I think we have seen that in the Valley across many different industries, right? What happened to Sun with the PC industry? What happened to the mainframe before that with the workstations, right? Each successive generation of technologies has obsoleted the technologies of the past generation. So we needed something like that that would really be able to take Cisco on in the heart of their business, which was all wired networking. And so we just felt Wi-Fi as a technology had that promise, where not only can you differentiate technologically, there was a lot of R&D ahead, but you could actually have a structural differentiator in the business, which over time, if the world went all wireless, then the need for pulling all the cables and the ports and the switches and everything else that Cisco made billions of dollars on would crumble. And so even though Cisco had Wi-Fi technology, for them to truly promote it and make it grow was going to be a hard decision for them. And so that's what I felt was a bet worth making for a company that was going to last a long time. And when you start a company, that's the one thing, dream big, right? You're going to do this, you're going to spend your life doing it, so do it for a big cause rather than a small cause. And for us, we really wanted to have a sustainable business model moving forward. And so we picked Wi-Fi, and this is my co-founder Pankaj and me. 10 years ago, as I promised you, I had no gray hairs then. And that was our stealth mode logo that we had built up. Actually, Pankaj's wife made that logo for us when we came up with the name Aruba Networks. And we were basically, we decided Wi-Fi was important. We did some diligence. In fact, I remember the way we did diligence, because we were not Wi-Fi experts at the time. We were networking guys. Wi-Fi was new to us. So a lot of Wi-Fi technology was being built at Bell Labs up in New Jersey. And we had some friends up in Bell Labs. So we took some flights, sleeping in my friends' apartments on the floor. We didn't want to spend money on hotels. We did splurge once in New York City, trying to meet a customer, and this was when we had a hotel room. If you go to New York City often, this is in the Hilton on the Avenue of the Americas on 6th Avenue. Some of you have been there. It's a nice hotel, right? And it was a splurge, right? But guess what? Those were the days of Priceline. Okay, and hotels were going empty. And so we didn't know where we were in Boston the night before. And we knew we were going to sleep in New York City the following day. So we put a bid in on Priceline for $75 for 2 beds, and we got it. So we were like, hey, this is great, $75, Avenue of the Americas. Met a bunch of customers, stayed there for a couple of days, and then flew back, all on the frequent flyer miles that we had accumulated in our Cisco days. So it was a very, very economical business trip. But that's what you do, right? When you're trying to start a company, those are the kinds of things in terms of how you want to manage your money that happens. The main thing that we wanted to do, once we decided, okay, the diligence was done, our idea was viable, this idea of basically a centralized controller-based architecture for enabling mobility and security inside enterprises, we had to go do 2 things. We had to go raise money, and we had to go build a team, right? And it's a chicken and egg, right? You go to the VCs, they say, where's your team? You go to the team, they say, where's the money? And so this is where you need the best selling skills, right? This is where your vision has to come out. You have to convince engineers that are fundamentally a cynical bunch, right? They've seen a lot, and they'll say, hey, why you? And why this idea? And you have to have the passion and your gut to be able to have it come across to someone, convincing them to come. And I was able to basically recruit maybe 7 or 8 people on zero salary, right, in 2002. Dipinder is one of them. He's right here. He remembers those days. We used to go eat lunches at Jing Jing, right, in Palo Alto, hanging out with Shirish Sathe, who's, I think a lot of you know, is a VC. He was at VC at Khosla and Matrix Partners before. We were his first investment. So even he was trying to get his first company off the ground. So we found a good partner, and he decided that he liked the idea enough to fund it. And now we had to go syndicate the idea and syndicate with somebody else. He said, I'll give you half the money. We needed $10 million to make it viable. And by the way, how do you come up with $10 million? That's another important question, right? For me, because I had not run a business, I'd run products and so on, really building a budget was very difficult, right? And Shirish thankfully helped out, right? That's where good partners come in, right? He was like, this kind of idea, this is the kind of money you need. And we sat down and built a plan for what amount of money you need to go build this kind of product. We were going to build access points, we were going to build controllers, we were going to build some software, we need testing, So basically you put down your head count and you go, this is the average salary, this is how many months it takes, and that's how the $10 million number came out. And then he said, okay, I'll give you 5, you need to go find 5. Because he really wanted to see if somebody else would buy it too. And then we started to do the tours. And because we went around talking to pretty much everyone. And I didn't know too many VCs at the time, just a handful, 1 or 2, I would say. So we went around talking to more David Howe Ventures and Redpoint and Excel and, a whole bunch of guys that Matrix knew. And pretty much everybody said, Wi-Fi is a commodity space. Where, Netgear sell Wi-Fi in Fry's Electronics. There's no pricing power in it. So we don't see a company being formed in this kind of area. And so we had $5 million, but those $5 million were no good if I couldn't get the other $5 million. And so finally, we called Sequoia and we said, hey, we want to come talk to you guys. And I was lucky enough to be introduced to a gentleman by name Doug Leone, who is one of the key guys at Sequoia these days. And Doug called me up and he was like, this was, let me think. It was a Thursday. He said, hey, I heard you guys are starting a company. I want to hear your pitch. Can you come in? So we said, fine, when? He said, now. We were on Sandhill Road. We were just parked there. So he said, in coffee shops and stuff like that, you just wait for the call, right? So I drove over and within half an hour, I was in Doug's office, me and my co-founder. And we did the pitch. It was a 1-hour pitch. And in 30 minutes, he stopped me and he said, stop right now. I said, man, he's not going to bite. This is going to be another downer. He said, no, I'll give you a call back. And true to his word, we are done here. You guys head back. And Pankaj and I looked at each other and said, another one down the drain. And before we got out of 3000 Sandhill Road, we got a call from Doug saying, I want you guys to come back on Monday and pitch to the partnership. That was a good sign, right? And so we went back on Sunday with the pitch. And the entire partnership was there. Sequoia partnership was there. We did the pitch, Don Valentine. These are just who's who, right? Mike Moritz, all these guys who were in the audience listening to the pitch. And at the end of it, we got an applause. It went really well. The pitch was really good. And Doug said, that was a good pitch, guys, but I need you to come back at 3 o'clock because we missed Pierre Lamond, who was another pretty important VC partner at Sequoia. Come back at 3 o'clock, and I want you to meet Pierre. And if Pierre says yes, then we'll try to move forward. So we pitched to Pierre at 3 o'clock, and then Doug came out again and said, that was a good pitch. Now I want to see your team. And I said, okay, where is my team? So I called all these guys. They were parked in the Starbucks coffee shop and said, hey, or at Matrix, and said, I need you guys to come over. So they all came immediately. Within 30 minutes, they were there, like 5, 6 of us. And I said, this is my team. And this is the idea. So Doug said, okay, we are interested. We want to do the $5 million. And so my co-founder, Pankaj, at the time, he wouldn't believe Doug. So what do you mean you'll do it? I'm not going to walk away from here just on your word. So Doug was like, what do you, Doug was taken aback. He's like, what do you mean? I'm going to sign the term sheet. He said, no, I need something in writing. So Doug actually took a legal pad, a yellow legal pad, and said, this note is good for $5 million on Series A, and tore it and gave it to Pankaj and said, here, is this good? And then we walked back. It's still with Aruba, that particular yellow legal pad. So that was the phase of time building. It took us about, I would say, in earnest from January to end of March, 2.5 months to hone the pitch to all these VCs and really convince somebody. And you know what? Sequoia I got a ton of warnings from a lot of people. Sequoia, they said, it's a fantastic VC firm, but be careful about taking their money. I said, Hare, what is going on? They funded Google and Yahoo and Cisco and all the big companies. They basically said these guys are ruthless, and as founders, you got to watch your back. And if you're not up to the mark, you'll be out of a job. And this would be from a lot of people, and Sequoia had that reputation in those days. So we were weighing, man, we take their money, and 6 months later we may not have anything, or you don't. And we finally, let our sort of in your gut, you feel like you have to do this. That's what we felt. I mean, Sequoia, you don't say no to Sequoia. So we said we'll do it. And that was probably one of the best decisions I took in starting the company. Because just after that particular decision, the kind of resources that a company like Sequoia is able to bring to bear is fantastic, right? And the resources are in the form of basically executive management leadership, right? The class of people that you attract as a Sequoia company is in a world of its own. And so we were able to get to talk to leaders to really come and join the company. And that was extremely important. Of course, later I'll tell you a little bit also about how else they helped. But that was the fundraising and team building part. That's when the journey began. And because we were first time entrepreneurs starting a company, at the time of starting Aruba, the one important trend that was in place was Intel had launched the Centrino program to put Wi-Fi on the motherboard. And so we basically said, whenever Intel does something like that, the networking technology behind it usually does well. So we felt Wi-Fi was going to do well because of this. And of course, later, the real inflection point for the business came when the iPhone and the iPad were introduced, because now we were going past laptop connectivity to real true mobile connectivity inside the enterprise. And these days, of course, the way we talk to customers is the reality is most of your traffic is going over the air anyway. Look at how you use your devices, right? It's very rare that people are still sitting at their desk and generating most of the traffic. Most of the connectivity, we spend time on these devices. And so as I talk to CIOs today, that vision 12 years ago that we were going to basically go at the heart of Cisco and eliminate the wires and go towards an all wireless office is coming true, right? It took a long time, but it's happening. And it's happening not just because of us, the world is cooperating, right? Folks like, Steve Jobs was a big help here, right? In bringing iPhones and iPads to the world. And, things like unified communications is migrating over to these mobile devices now. Apple just announced voice over Wi-Fi calling. So the world, we are living on these devices, and enterprises are looking to us going, if I were to rethink how I build a corporate office, would I go build it with cabling, or am I going to do with wireless? And the answer is, it's a rhetorical question. People are saying, we want to go do all wireless. So this has been our 10-year journey. Along the way, of course, we were the first to introduce the notion of a controller-based wireless LAN in the market. We were selected. I think our signature win in the market came from Microsoft, where when they held a bake-off, and there was a bunch of competitors in the space, including Cisco, and they selected Aruba. That was the point at which that was a turning point, I would say, for the company, where we said, okay, it's validated by Microsoft to be deployed in their global network, so it's good for anybody. And that's on the heels of that is where we were able to kind of continue to build the business and take it to the public markets in 2007. So 5 years after starting the company, we were able to list it on NASDAQ, and it was $1 billion market cap when we launched it. As Naveen said, it's $2.5 billion now. We have seen the ups and the downs. One of the downs we have seen is when the 2008-2009 downturn came about. Right, the stock went from $11, which was what the IPO price, to $2, $1.80 or something like that. It was really, really low, and not just us. The whole industry went down. But those are the times that are the most trying and pressing times to really test what you're made of, and that's important enough. So I'll take a second and describe that. But after that, again, we've been on a ramp. The business continues to grow. We've had over 30 quarters of reporting in the public markets, financial reporting in the public markets. The things, the lessons that I've learned, I would say, over the last 12 years, you always start out as a technology company. You need to have a soul of what problems you're trying to solve. That's captured usually in this context of a technology vision. You need that to kind of drive the company forward, but you need to root that in the real world of customers. What are customers looking for, and how does your technology apply to customers? So that relentless customer focus, and then execute on that day in and day out. It's 99.9% execution. 0.1% is the soul, right? When it comes to actually building the company up. And one thing you realize when we started the company, we would be advised that culture is going to be the most important thing that sets you apart. And as young entrepreneurs, we didn't quite know what that meant, to be perfectly honest with you. 10 years later, I can tell you it's everything. Culture is everything in the company. And as you build out your companies, that's the one thing I didn't pay much attention to in the early days, but I would say I would highly recommend paying a lot of attention to. What it evolved to for us, the three things in our culture. The first one is this notion of customer first, customer last. It's imprinted in the DNA of the company. Everybody in the company, when the customer calls and says, jump for me, we ask how high. That's how the culture is built. The second one is brutal intellectual honesty. This is when you're going through a lot of very tough business decisions, you have to be intellectually honest with yourself, your employees, your board, and everyone, without fear of consequences. If you color it with consequences, you will end up making wrong decisions. And this was the other big finding. And this is, again, very important to a cultural statement for us in the company is we don't tolerate smooth talk. It has to be, this is where when I said constructive confrontation, this is another way to kind of put it, right? You have to actually bring the truth out all the time. And the third thing we've learned is being iterative and nimble at things is much better than being perfect and late, right? When you have ideas, do it. Don't wait, right? And it won't be right, but this is where we learned from the Tahoe experience and said, hey, being perfect and late is not going to cut it, right? Don't try to fix all the problems in your past life, right? Move forward. You're going to get it wrong anyway, but if you do it, at least you will do it early. You might have a chance to fix it later. But if you're late, then nobody will be at your party. And the hard stuff for us was the first one was to sell the company or not. Okay, this way, if you're successful, offers will come your way. Bigger companies will come and ask you, hey, we're interested in buying the company. We had that opportunity literally 1 year into building the company. We had an offer to sell the company for roughly $80 million. And I had raised $10 million, $80 million, that's 8 times. That's a pretty good outcome. And for me, because I'm coming from a place where I was barely able to pay my mortgage off, that would put $5 million in my pocket, right? So that's not chump change. That's decent money. And but here is the deal, right? You're basically truncating your vision completely by doing that. I think that's the thing to realize is what happens is at that point in time, the character of the company changes. You become part of this bigger company, and we felt we had not built enough, even though it was a decent payday. We just didn't. Going back to that hollow feeling at Cisco, I just felt like I have not really built anything yet, and that was really the reason behind doing all of this work. So we just said no. We said no. We wouldn't sell the company at the time. And again, that was one of those times where we were in two minds. Some days we felt like we should take the offer. Some days we felt like we shouldn't. And we had a very, very tough conversation with the VCs. And this was when I learned partnering, what partnering means. And when you take the money from the VCs and they become a partner, they have a say in what your company should and shouldn't do. And they are in it clearly for the financial returns, right? They also want to build great companies. They want to see their companies on 101. But fundamentally, it's a financial business and they're looking for a return. And to them, that $80 million didn't move the needle. Right? They put only $5 million each to work, and a return wasn't enough to basically return the fund, which is what they're looking for. And so we basically said we were not going to sell. 3 years later, another offer came along. This is when we won Microsoft, where Cisco came and said, we want to buy your company. And again, we said no. And this time it was the VC said, are you sure? Because we've made enough money now. But again, we felt like going back to Cisco was, again, I'd built a product. I'm going to put it through the Cisco channels. And I didn't want to do that. And so they acquired a competitor of ours called Airspace. And we basically said we're going to fight it out with Cisco. There's going to be a challenger. There's going to be an alternative to Cisco in the market. And we're going to become that. Some of the, that was, I would say those were the two pivotal points. We could have gone in a different direction entirely. And it would have been a good outcome, but not the outcome that we have, where the market cap is at $2.5 billion and we're continuing to grow. The other tough stuff, executive transitions, as a founder, when you start and you hire executives, some of them don't work out. And not because they're bad people, it is just the situation demands situations such that chemistry or whatever else, their skills doesn't really translate to the situation you're in. You need to cut your losses and move fast. That's hard to do, especially if the executive is placed by VCs. Okay, but again, this is where the intellectual honesty part comes in, where you have to, if you believe that's a decision to make, you have to face the consequences and just put it in front of the board. Perhaps my hardest is actually the downturn, where you have to lay off people for no reason at all, other than your business is not coming. So there's a good reason, but they've done a good job. It's not any fault of theirs that I'm going to let people go. And from an emotional perspective, I would say as a leader, that's probably the hardest thing for most of us if we've done that to go through. Our quarterly earnings reports are not easy. As a public company, we've done 30 quarters. We've missed 2. We've beat 28. But those 2 are what haunt you. Okay, the stock actually takes a beating when that happens. And the one thing I've learned is through those misses is to stay focused, because these things are temporary. If your vision is real and you're going towards something really big, the downturns will come and go, and the upturns will come as well. You just have to stay focused and keep going and not panic. Right? That was the Intel lesson from the early days. Right? Do not panic when you miss. Sometimes it happens. Right? The deals don't show up at the right time, so you're not able to make it happen. But perhaps the hardest thing for me personally has been my evolution in the company, and this question about what should my role be, okay, as a individual. And the first thing that I learned after starting the company is you're no longer an employee, okay? You are the owner, and there is a definite shift in mindset. Okay? You have to really internalize that, because it's not you don't have a job. Okay, I get a paycheck. I got a paycheck from the VCs, but that was not my job. I am the owner of this business and I'm trying to grow this business. That's the mental shift. It's easy to kind of become a founder, but it's hard to kind of make the mental transition from being an employee to this owner kind of culture. And this is where having that owner culture gives you that moral authority, if you will, to do the right things for the business, right? Being an employee, if you're looking out for your job, is not going to be not going to lead you to making the right decisions. The other one is you have to transition. I had to transition from being a founder to being an executive, and this is more in the context of as the company grew. In the early days, I'm a founder with my founding engineers, and to these guys, I am the first among equals. Okay, but we are all equals at some level. But as the company grows, this founder becomes a very important title. People look up to you, and in a way that your founding engineers won't. Okay, I'll tell you that. Dipinder will go kick my ass in the closet. But employees that join Aruba today look to me as the moral authority, right? And that's a mental change that I had to go through, saying I have to behave differently here. And this is the what I loosely term the executive style has to evolve from being that employee, a founding guy to really managing the business. The other one is you have to transition from being a supportive colleague to being a coach and a mentor, because people are looking to you. And these are all mental shifts that you have to go through very, very rapidly as you grow the business. And today, for me, it is transitioning from my focus being primarily inbound within the company and growing the company to the community, right? Because we live in the valley, we live in the industry, in the networking industry, and we have a greater place in the community and the ecosystem that we are in, right? This to me is also community, right? Being able to give back. And so I think that actually shapes a lot of who I am and where I'm going to continue to head. And the last one I think is a transition I'm still going through and my company is still going through, which is to change from this challenger mentality. Because if you noticed everything I said, we were going to go beat Cisco, right? So Cisco was clearly the leader and we were the challenger. I think we are no longer in that world, right? I feel good that we can go beat Cisco now. But we have to stop thinking about being the challenger and becoming a leader in the business. And how you behave as a leader is a different ball game. So each step has its own challenge, its own growth opportunity for you as individuals. And it's really up to you to step up and grab it and run with it. And it's a very, very rewarding journey. The biggest lesson that I've learned is it's not entrepreneurship, starting companies, it's not a career path. It's not something you put on a resume. Okay, it's a way of life. That's the one thing that if there's one way to think about it, it's inside you. This is what you grow up. This is what you do. I love hearing pitches from people. That's why I'm an angel investor. I love helping entrepreneurs start new ideas. It gets my blood rushing, right? And so that I think is at the heart of it all, right? If you don't feel that, don't do it. And don't certainly do it for the money, okay? Because it is not guaranteed at all. And it's not the right motivation either. Money will come if you do the right thing in terms of having a vision and going to want to change the world, whatever it is your goal is, right? Money will come as long as you focus on the right thing. And don't be in a hurry. That's the other thing, right? Prepare yourself. And the three last things to me is the biggest things, right? Dream big. Don't settle for small ideas. There's many small ideas. Incremental ideas is what I call them. Incremental ideas are when there's a product hole and I'm going to fix that hole in somebody's portfolio. Those companies usually don't become very big companies. Companies that become big are companies that tackle big markets, solve big problems. Sequoia calls it monster markets, right? They're looking for the next $1 billion, $1 trillion type opportunities. And to do that, you need to prepare yourself. Take the time, learn and figure out, because you need to build the street cred to be able to do something big and be able to corral people, get the financing, get the people convinced around you to go make it happen. And finally, just do it. To me, it took, I would say, a little bit longer than I wanted to. I didn't have to take that Tahoe jump in the middle, but I did. But you'll know when you're ready, you'll know. And all I can say is I'd encourage you to continue to do it and take the plunge and do it. So that's it. Thank you. I took a little longer than I thought I would, but...
Thank you, Keerti. Thank you, Keerti. Very inspiring, amazing. We really appreciate it. So I know all of you are excited to ask questions, so please have them ready. I'm just going to ask one question to break the ice. I think I had two actually, so you already kind of responded, so I'll leave that since, and in the, if we have time later on, I may ask again. So one of the quotes in one of your articles, I couldn't figure out the article. I just did a Google search, thanks to Google. So awesome,
Yeah.
right? Thanks to Larry Page and Sergey Brin. They made our life so easy. It said Keerti Melkote quotes. So I came out and I was trying to see which article, so it didn't tell me. But anyway, I'm going to say the quote. It says, mobility is becoming a big factor for businesses. The wireless LAN will eventually replace the LAN switch entirely, resulting in a much larger network. So at what stage do you believe we are in complete replacement of LAN switch?
Yeah. So this to me, is this on?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We are there now, right? I always felt we were there, but the phases that we went through, the first phase was this laptop wireless, and we were definitely not at a stage where we could tell a customer, you don't need to pull cables anymore. The reason for that was, even though the laptop was wireless, a lot of work was still done on the workstation, at the desk. Then there was about, when the 2008, 2009 came around, there was this technology called 11N, which basically meant you had enough bandwidth to replace that computer connection, but there was still that phone that needed the cable, right? The voice over IP desk phone. But today, I challenge you, how many people actually use that desk phone?
But what do you think is the percentage in like the enterprise is still like?
It's still not there. The market opportunity is still not there.
Yeah.
So what I tell customers now is, your employees are living on their mobile devices. You're wasting money pulling cable and setting up these workstation and desk phones. Figure out a way to enable them on their mobile device. Okay. And they buy in. So now I don't have to sell the concept. They're asking me, how do I do it? That's a sign that the world has changed. But if you go, the vast majority of infrastructure out there, it's still all wired. Yeah. So I see still blue sky for the next 7 years.
It's a lot of opportunity for you.
A lot of opportunity, absolutely.
It's great. Okay, so we'll open to the audience. So who would be the first one? Okay, please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Ashutosh Sharma. I have a question about security with LAN versus wireless. I work in a building that also houses the treasury department of the organization. And I guess, and I speculate that for this particular reason, they haven't enabled the wireless in the whole building. Other geographies of the same organization has a wireless accessibility for all employees. So just as a question, is that a hindering factor for the organizations out there, so that, or what could be the one?
No, I'll tell you a few things. Wireless security right now is better than wired security. And the reason for that is all the traffic that goes over the air is encrypted. It's authenticated and encrypted. When you use WPA2 or all these things that you're using on your devices, it's authenticated and encrypted. When you plug into the wire, it's neither authenticated nor encrypted. Okay, so wireless is actually more secure, and the data. So we have the security capabilities to kind of deliver peace of mind to that category of customers. And so treasury and all these, the normal applications, wireless is not the culprit. In security, it's more about phishing and all these other attacks that are happening rather than the wireless layer itself.
Great. Next question.
Thank you for the talk. I'm curious what your security idea was. If Aruba was a security company, what would that be?
Yes, that's a good question. It was basically, what we realized was in security, back in 2001, there was a parade of security appliances that a customer would have to deploy. And it would be a firewall, it would be an intrusion detection system, it would be anti-spam systems and antivirus, and there was just to do security. And so the simple idea that we had was, could we build a platform that unified all of those things? And I think it's still a good idea, but people haven't done it yet. It's a tall order to go fix that. But I think security has become a lot more important. A lot of innovation has gone in the industry now. And I think there's a lot of money going to be continue to be spent in the security space over the next decade.
Thank you.
Hi, Keerti. Thank you very much for the talk. I was briefly a colleague at Cisco. Hope you recognize me.
Yeah. How are you?
It's a phenomenal story. Thank you very much. My question to you is Aruba a Wi-Fi company or a wireless company? And two, how you're embracing other spectra, say cellular and other things that will open up, say for IoT and all the things that come down the pike?
So Aruba is neither a Wi-Fi company nor a wireless company. We call ourselves a mobility company, okay? Because our value proposition goes above the physical layer of transport. Our value proposition is really about enabling the mobile use cases that run on top of the infrastructure on the transport. Because if all you need is Wi-Fi and wireless, you could go buy Wi-Fi from Netgear, right? What we'd end up doing is solving the security problem on top of Wi-Fi, or solving a location problem. If you go to Levi Stadium, we're using Wi-Fi. It's Aruba Wi-Fi there in Levi Stadium. But the cool application is not that you get great Wi-Fi. It's that when you're sitting at your seat and you order hamburger or fries or chicken masala, which is available too, you can ask the person to bring it to your seat, or for an extra fee, or you can actually ask for the closest delivery point for that particular order. So it's totally automated, and it uses location. The notion of physical location of where you are is something we glean from the network and feed it into applications. So we are moving and more into solving the mobility problems, and we will leverage pretty much any spectrum that's available to us, including licensed spectrum, as the case may be. Unlicensed happens to be a lot easier to do business in, which is why we've been able to grow the way we are. Licensed spectrum is a lot more regulated to be able to do something. But at our scale, I think we can do something in licensed spectrum space. Talking about IoT, I think it's well known that for all these IoT devices, Wi-Fi is going to be the means of connectivity inside. And so IoT is something that is going to add further fuel to this revolution. Yeah, it's a good question.
Next question.
Hey, Keerti, at what point you realized that whatever the 5 lakhs you brought was paid off?
Good question. So it was 1 year after my Intel job. That was my first goal. Like before I'll tell you, my safety net was, Intel, when you get your first job, you're on practical training, right? And you need to then transition to H1. So I said I have 1 year to clear the loan. After that, I can do whatever I want. So it took me a year. So what role would Aruba play in the enterprise mobile apps business? What role would Aruba play in the enterprise mobile apps business? So we have tried to innovate in 2 areas, security and mobility. So one of the things that we tried to do was build on top of, I think Ajay Mishra came and spoke on Mobile Iron, right? Mobile security with MDM and things like that is something we focused on. That's a space that I would say the innovation has gotten away from Aruba, so we have not focused there a whole lot. Where we are looking to focus now is a lot more in the unified communications over wireless and location applications. I think collaboration is one area that I think is going to be a big driver with UC and with voice video communications. And location, like the example I gave you at Levi Stadium, is going to be huge. The examples that I can tell you is when you go to a mall, the biggest thing the mall owners, the retailers are worried about is that they're showrooms for Amazon. So how do you bridge the gap from being a showroom for Amazon by giving you, the shopper, a much more immersive experience when you're in the store, where you can bridge the online gap, which is what is there for the retailers. So that, again, is enabled through location. When you're there with a device, the fact that you're in the coats department or in the shoes department can be useful in feeding information to you as a shopper. So there's a lot of business applications that are becoming available using this location concept, which I think is going to be important. Okay. It's what outdoor location has done. It has not. Outdoor location works on GPS, but it fails. GPS fails once you walk in through the 4 doors. So what do you do indoors?
Hi, Keerti. I think you answered part of my question. We are a partner with Aruba on location analytics.
Yeah.
My broader question
Who are you
was,
with?
I'm with Sensitel.
Okay.
Yeah, and our application is Staffcaster for retail. My broader question was how you think about growth now. So when you started, you had $10 million, which is resulted in $2.5 billion, right? So, but now you have a lot more money. So, lot more of those 10 millions. So location is one area you see clearly, right, as big benefit, a big opportunity. But how do you think at this scale, like the investment you make, would they yield you 5x, 10x? They won't obviously be the same success story which you have already had.
Yeah, so this is a very, very, very critical question that we as a management team and board always look at. Is at a scale, we are at a $800 million annual scale. And so not too far from the $1 billion mark. Hopefully we'll hit it soon. So to grow, we need to be adding $100 million business a year. Almost, right? Multiple $100 million business a year. If you're at a Cisco scale, you're at $1 billion businesses a year. It's a different. So the metrics do change, and we're looking for those kinds of opportunities, right? So we really have to figure out the investments that get us the growth that we're looking for to continue to be the growth story. Yet, the balancing factor in this whole process as a public company is that you have to do it in a profitable way. I can't take all my money and pour it into R&D. Right? I have to return some operating margin leverage to the shareholders. And whatever the model is that you promised to the shareholders, we promised 20% is our operating margin. And so my R&D envelope is about 15% of my revenue. And within that envelope is what I need to innovate. Otherwise, I break the model because my sales and marketing costs are different. So this is what you end up realizing is as you become a public company, you're running a full P&L. You have degrees of freedom that are limited. And you have to be very wise in the choices that you make. So we've been lucky. We've made some acquisitions that have turned out to be really good. One of them in the security space with a company called Avenda, which is now the ClearPass product line that we sell in the market. Airwave was another one. These are software companies. So we're typically looking for software type assets that allows us to keep the margins high and adds to the security mobility areas rather than the wireless. The wireless we see as our core competence. We're going to continue to innovate. Bulk of my R&D is going to go there. But the software innovation on top, I think, is where the opportunities will be.
Hi, Keerti. I'm Madhu. I have a 2-part question. How would you answer privacy concerns for using a public Wi-Fi, like Aruba is used publicly? And the second part would be, you mentioned micro-location and indoor location mapping. How do you look at Bluetooth Low Energy, which is planning to replace the
if you go to Levi's, we use Bluetooth Low Energy there.
Okay, so that's
it's Wi-Fi plus Bluetooth Low Energy. Bluetooth Low Energy, for those of you that don't know, the iBeacon technology from Apple uses Bluetooth Low Energy. I think BLE will be very big for micro-location and proximity. Privacy-wise, I think iOS 8 has made some changes already where, what happened was the whole analytics space was built around this idea of your MAC address, which is this identifier for your Wi-Fi card in your phone, is your user identifier. And because they mine your information in the cloud, they can correlate your MAC address to who you are, and Google obviously knows everything you do. So you can obviously use that information to do, promote. I mean, if you're using it the right way, it's for retailers and so on to use. But clearly there's a privacy concern associated with that kind of technology. And so what Apple has done cleverly is basically they said, we're going to randomize the MAC address. So now you can't tell who the user is because it's a random MAC address. And I think that is going to happen more and more. And so they'll keep you private. So the privacy concerns will be addressed by the technology. So these models that I talked about, the concessions ordering in Levi Stadium or giving you a better shopping experience when you're at Nordstrom or Macy's, is going to be an opt-in model. You're going to be inside the app to be able to, and you give them permission to market to you, which is not very unlike what other systems do today.
Next question. We'll have two more questions, so please.
What would have happened if that would have gone the other way? You didn't get 10 million or you ran out of 10 million. Did it cross your mind?
Yeah, what would have happened if I had gone the other way? Yeah, so I had given myself a definite deadline, which was at the end of the $50,000, I was not going to dip in anymore in my savings. I was going to go find a job. And as luck would have it, we were able to close the funding round within that 6-month window of going. But yeah, if we didn't, then I would be probably working at Cisco or some other company.
Usually, when we read all the books about entrepreneurs, they don't give up, they sustain, and you are saying you're
Yeah, so I mean, look, that it's a theoretical question. I answered a theoretical answer. I don't know, right? If I had really faced that particular situation, whether I would have persisted or not. I certainly had the ability to persist for a little bit longer if I could see the end. But if there was too much more at stake, to be honest with you, than my own entrepreneurial dreams, because we had a kid to worry about and a family to worry about. So I would not have given up trying, but at least financially I would have gone and worked somewhere and probably moonlighted in figuring out what to do, like a lot of entrepreneurs do, right?
So let me ask, anyone have a question?
I think there was one more there.
Okay, please.
Hi, I'm Priya Patel from Morrison & Forrester. Thanks. So you mentioned that company culture was really important, and you had 3 tenets that were sort of the foundation of your company culture.
Yeah.
And how did you come up with those? Was it organic, or did you go into your building your company knowing that those 3 things were important from your prior experiences?
That's a very, very good question. It was organic, and had I had the foresight when I started the company, I would have tried to make it a little bit more structured upfront, because it feels shallow to be discussing culture when you just have like 5 people around you, right? And you go, man, what are you talking about? Let's go build product. But I'll tell you, in the 10, 12 years, the constant beat and the rhythm of the company is defined by the culture of the company, right? People come, people go, but the company continues because of its culture. We were lucky. What happened to us was everybody I hired in 2002, if you remember, it was after the dot-com bust. Okay, it was not good times. It was a very bad time. We were one of the few companies that had fresh money. Right? Everybody else was burning money, like the Tahoe example I gave you. There was like millions and millions of dollars. Companies were shutting down. 2 things happened. One, I was able to get the best talent because they were all looking for doing something. So it's actually a very good time to start companies in tough times from a talent perspective. The other thing that was a common glue that bound all of us was that we're not going to go build the perfect product. We're going to go build for revenue. And what that meant was whatever the customer wants, we're going to do, right? Yes, it is in this general direction, but the customer is king. And that became kind of the soul of the culture. I didn't have to tell anyone how to behave. They knew exactly what to do. And that's what culture is, right? It's what people do just naturally. The intellectual honesty part came in a little bit later. As the company started to evolve, we wanted to it was a democratic culture. We would because it was a bunch of people with strong opinions, if their opinions weren't heard, we would know. So we would be proactive about that. But democratic cultures can be very consensus driven and basically cripple decision making, right? So we had to go force that constructive confrontation model with different words. And so we used this brutal intellectual honesty as the terms for that. Being nimble and being creative and being fast was just an outgrowth of how we build products. I mean, it's an outgrowth of the customer first, customer last culture, right? You have a roadmap, you have a plan, but if a customer says, I want this, you have to shelve that and do what the customer wants, because that's where the money is coming from at the end of the day. And that kind of informed the culture as well. So what I would have done is probably listen to some of the advice I got at the time. I didn't, because it felt, to be honest, it felt unnatural to really define a culture when with 5 people around you. But even though it's unnatural, I would recommend doing it. And you can modify it, but it's a habit that you get into.
Okay.
Oh, hi, Keerti. Thanks for sharing your journey with us. So going back to your chicken and egg problem. So I've seen increasingly now that VCs would like to fund if you have some beta customers or in a beta program, which is different from what you had gone through earlier. So how do you advise, what kind of advice do you give to entrepreneurs who are going through that phase of trying to raise bootstrap as well as trying to raise fund in this model?
Yeah, so I think the world has changed. There is a lot more interest, I think, because of the primarily software-oriented investments that are happening today. Is they're looking for slightly more developed companies to invest in. So I think the VCs have cleverly moved from Series A to Series B investing. Okay, the primary VCs. There's very few real Series A investing happening right now, in my opinion. A lot of the Series A investing is happening through angels. And and there's a big angel network out there. Thai Angels is one of them, right? But there's a lot of angels out there that are taking the risks and making the right bets. And so that's what I would recommend is, the first $2 to $3 to $4 million probably comes from angels. And then once you get to that product readiness state is when you go pitch the company and raise the growth funding that you need.
Please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Rajiv Singh. I just wanted to make a comment because of your points about culture, because I spent 21 years at Intel.
Yeah.
And one of the top 3 cultures that we had there, which really has sustained Intel through its lifespan, has been what you said, constructive confrontation. And the other thing I call it is what they call effective meetings.
Yeah.
And the third one is decisions based on data. And I think that's where Intel may have kind of stumbled a bit when Andy Grove refused to believe the floating point issue because the customer said something, but the data didn't support it. So I think you're making it customer is king, which is what everybody else seems to think of customer is God, is probably one step above decisions based on data, because Intel is purely decisions based on data. It has been most of its life. Yeah. So I had another question for you. I mean, you had growth in your company through what you've said, that what happened was like the Centrino launch, then the iPhone, the iPad. What do you think is the next device is going to connect the rest of the world, and you're going to be riding that wave?
Yeah. So to us, I think we are very fortunate to be in the right place at the right time. I think IoT is going to be a huge trend, right? I mean, and when I say IoT, it is everything is going to be connected. Everything. I literally mean that camera there, the chalkboard, pen that you use on the whiteboard itself, pretty much any device that you see around will be connected. And most of those devices will be connected over Wi-Fi. So that I think is intrinsic growth for us in terms of density of things that will connect. But I think the real opportunity that I salivate at is the software that needs to be built on top of this infrastructure to enable these businesses to come to life. Yeah, I think there's a ton of opportunity there.
Last question, Andrew.
Yeah, can you talk a little bit about how you approach actually investing yourself from an angel point of view? Because you've been running rather large companies at this point. The money you took from Sequoia, they were probably above a certain threshold. I actually thought you were going to tell us that they were going to force you to sell at 80 million, but you said no, they actually wanted a much bigger net result to move the needle.
They never want to sell. Sequoia's gig, by the way, is they want to build the next Google.
Okay. But in terms of the earlier stage for angels, and you're saying it's actually the angels basically have stepped up to take up some of the risk that VCs were doing before.
Yeah.
Can you explain a little bit of your thought process and why you get involved?
Happy to. I get a lot of pitches from a lot of entrepreneurs. And the things that I don't invest in is when it is not solving a real problem. Okay? And you'll be surprised how many ideas I get that don't describe the problem well. Okay, so the first thing I look for is what is the pain that you're trying to solve. It could be a small pain. It doesn't have to be a grand pain. It could lead to something big in the future, but solve a problem. The worst ideas to me are platform ideas. I'm going to build a platform for IoT. I'm going to build a platform for cloud. These are just words to me, right? They don't really mean a whole lot. You really have to pinpoint a customer pain and say, by solving this problem, I'm going to get the customer to part with some money to pay for this product. It needs to be that specific. Otherwise, I'm not going to invest. Because that tells me a lot about what you know, how deep is your knowledge of the industry, how deep is your knowledge of the customer, how deep is your knowledge of the pain. Otherwise, to me, you're reading a bunch of white papers, analyst reports, and making up an idea. And that usually doesn't lead to success, is what I've found.
Okay. Well, the last question, I think some of them already asked. So let's say if you had to start a company today. So I'm just saying, so what would be that you would be doing, since there were so many entrepreneurs here? I'm sure they're refining their idea to turn it into a much bigger idea.
What's that? Yeah.
No,
Look,
I mean, let's say...
Look, the precursor is even if it's my money I'm going to put in, it's not going to be... I don't want to waste it. It's hard-earned money, okay?
Yeah, assuming there is no money and you have to just start the same way.
Yeah. So, I think, honestly, at the highest level right now, the technology industry is going through a very, very rapid change for the better. The last time I saw this kind of change was in the early 90s, when companies like Sun, Microsoft, Oracle, Novell, Cisco, right? That class of companies got built.
That's
right? In the enterprise space. Yeah. And then the consumer era came, Google, Yahoo, Facebook, all these new companies that we see on 101. But I think the next 10 years is going to be the game of the enterprise again. Which is good, because actually consumer businesses are a crapshoot a lot of times. Enterprise businesses can be a lot more predictable in building the business, as long as you're solving that real pain. And if you think about it, for these enterprises, their world has changed entirely. They no longer have to build much infrastructure in-house. If they do a Wi-Fi network, that's about all you need inside the building. Everything else is going to be living in the cloud. And you'll be either buying applications or you're going to be consuming services from the cloud, right? So all you need is a pipe going to the cloud. And that's the future. The present, however, is they have a boatload of infrastructure that they've invested in the past. They have a bunch of Oracle databases, they have a bunch of SAP systems, they have a bunch of basically servers from HP and Dell and all these other companies. So there's a bunch of investment and money still being poured. 85% of IT budgets still goes into the past. And if you talk to every CIO today, they are struggling to figure out, how do I take this and transition to this new world of where the world is actually headed. And I think that's where the opportunity is. And everything from the ground up is changing. Mobile is going to change everything. So when you build an app for a phone, it's going to look very different than an app for a browser. Okay, it's no longer web-based. It's going to be mobile-based economies. So I just look around and I go, man, there's a ton of opportunity. It's great time to be an entrepreneur right now. That if you can pinpoint the right idea and the right pain point, you can go innovate. The bar is to get a company off the ground today, I think, is actually much lower than it was in the past.
Okay, great. So let's give a big round of applause to Keerti.